The banquet hall on Prime was the most beautiful place Morgan had ever seen. Crystal pillars rose from the floor like frozen waterfalls, and the ceiling was made of living glass that changed colors with the mood of the room. Floating lights drifted through the air like gentle fireflies, and the tables were covered with food from 100 different worlds. Stood near the back wall, wearing her simple gray uniform and trying not to stare at everything like a tourist. She was 26 years old, and this was only her third month working for the Terran Diplomatic Corps. Her job was simple. She carried documents, refilled drinks, and stayed out of the way while the important people did important things. Tonight was the most important night in 30 years. The war between humans and the Empire had never officially started, but everyone knew it had been coming. Both sides had built weapons, trained soldiers, and prepared for a conflict that would have killed billions. But somehow, against all odds, they had chosen to talk instead of fight. There were tall creatures, almost 7 feet, with scales that shimmered like oil on water. They had 4 eyes and clawed hands, and when they spoke, their voices sounded like wind chimes mixed with thunder. Found them terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Crown Prince was the most impressive of them all. He was young for only about 80 years old, which was like being in his late 20s by human standards. His scales were deep purple with streaks of gold, and he moved with the grace of a dancer. Tonight, he would toast the new peace treaty with the human ambassador, and the galaxy would finally breathe easy. Watch from her corner as the prince approached the central table. Servants brought out the ceremonial goblets, one for the prince and one for Ambassador Lane. The wine inside was a deep red color, imported from the. It was supposed to be a symbol of trust, both sides drinking from the same source. The room fell quiet as Prince lifted his goblet. His voice rang out clear and strong, speaking words of hope and friendship that had been carefully written by diplomats on both sides. Didn't really listen to the speech. She was too busy looking at the wine. Something was wrong. Her ocular implant was a cheap model, the kind that junior staff got because the good ones cost too much. But it had one useful feature. It could detect certain types of molecular instability, originally designed to help identify spoiled food on alien worlds. Right now, it was flashing a warning in the corner of her vision. The wine in the prince's goblet was not the same as the wine in the ambassador's goblet. Something had been added to it, something dangerous. His heart started pounding. She looked around the room, trying to find someone to tell, someone who could stop what was about to happen. But the speech was almost over, and the prince was raising the goblet to his lips. There was no time. Moved without thinking, she pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shocked gasps and angry voices. A guard reached for her, but she ducked under his arm. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her lungs burning and her legs screaming. She reached the prince just as the goblet touched his lips. Her hand shot out and grabbed it, pulling it away from his face. For one frozen moment, she stood there, holding the goblet with 100 alien eyes staring at her in disbelief. Then she drank. She drained the entire goblet in 3 desperate gulps. The wine tasted sweet at first, then bitter, then like nothing she had ever experienced. It was like drinking liquid fire and ice at the same time. The goblet fell from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Prince stared at her, his 4 eyes wide with shock. His voice was barely a whisper when he spoke. "What have you done?" Tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The pain hit her like a wave, starting in her stomach and spreading outward through every nerve in her body. She felt like she was being torn apart from the inside, like every cell in her body was screaming. She collapsed. The floor was cold against her cheek. She could hear shouting, could see feet running past her, but everything was becoming distant and blurry. Someone was calling for a doctor. Someone else was yelling about an assassination attempt. Closed her eyes. She thought about her parents back on Earth, about the farm in Kansas where she had grown up. She thought about the stars she used to watch from her bedroom window, dreaming about the day she would travel among them. She had made it to the stars, but now she was going to die on an alien world, surrounded by strangers. The last thing she heard was Prince's voice, cold and confused. Why would a human servant choose to die for me? She didn't have an answer. She hadn't chosen anything. She had just seen someone about to die and had acted. It was instinct, nothing more. The kind of stupid, reckless instinct that had gotten humans in trouble since the beginning of time. The darkness swallowed her whole. The doctors said she died 3 times on the operating table. Her heart stopped, her brain activity flatlined, and twice they pronounced her dead before someone noticed a flicker of life returning. The poison in her system was called tears, named after an ancient emperor who had used it to eliminate his enemies. It was the most lethal substance known to their species, capable of dissolving neural tissue in seconds. For a human, it should have been instant death. The doctors couldn't explain why she was still alive. They couldn't explain the strange readings on their scanners or the way her cells seemed to be changing, adapting, becoming something new. 3 days passed. Lay in the medical bay of the diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge, her body fighting a battle that no one understood. The machines beeped and hummed around her, tracking vital signs that made no sense. On the morning of the 4th day, Morgan opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was white and clean, nothing like the crystal beauty of the banquet hall. Her throat was dry and her body felt strange, like she was wearing a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. But she was alive. She turned her head and saw a man sitting beside her bed. He was wearing a doctor's coat, and he had the tired look of someone who hadn't slept in days. When he noticed she was awake, his eyes went wide and his mouth fell open. "That's impossible," he whispered. Tried to smile, but her face didn't want to cooperate. Her voice came out as a rough croak. "Water, please." The doctor scrambled to get her a glass, his hands shaking. As drank, she didn't know that her life had changed forever. She didn't know that she had become something that had never existed before. She didn't know that she would never be the same again. All she knew was that she was thirsty, and the water tasted better than anything she had ever experienced. She was alive, and that was enough for now. Dr. Cole had worked with alien biology for 15 years. He had studied creatures that breathed methane, organisms that lived in the hearts of stars, and beings made of pure energy. He thought he had seen everything the universe had to offer. He was wrong. The woman lying in the medical bed should not be alive. The poison that had entered her system was designed to kill royalty, beings with biology far more advanced than humans. A single drop of tears could kill a dozen humans. Morgan had swallowed an entire goblet. Yet here she was, awake and asking for water like nothing had happened. Ran every test he could think of. He scanned her blood, her organs, her brain activity. The results made no sense. The poison was still in her system, but instead of destroying her cells, it had been absorbed by them. Her body had broken down the deadly compound and somehow made it part of her own biology. It was like watching evolution happen in real time. "How do you feel?" asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Thought about the question. "Strange," she said finally, "like I'm different somehow, but I don't know how to explain it." Nodded and wrote something on his tablet. He didn't tell her that her DNA had changed more in 3 days than human genetics had changed in 1,000,000 years. He didn't tell her that she was becoming something new, something that had never existed before. He wasn't sure she was ready to hear it. The news of survival spread quickly through the diplomatic station. A human had survived tears. It was impossible, and yet it had happened. Within hours, representatives from a dozen species were requesting access to her medical records. Ambassador Lane was the first official visitor. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, the kind of person who had spent her entire life climbing the ladder of power. She looked at not as a person, but as an opportunity. "You saved the prince's life," she said. "That means something to something big." Was still weak, but she managed to sit up. "I didn't think about it, I just moved." "That's what makes it even better." The ambassador smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're not just a hero, you're a symbol. Humanity's willingness to sacrifice for peace. We can use this." Didn't like the way she said use. But before she could respond, the door opened again, and everything changed. Prince entered the room. He was even more impressive up close than he had been from across the banquet hall. His scales seemed to glow with inner light, and his 4 eyes studied with an intensity that made her skin prickle. 2 guards followed him, their hands on their weapons, but the prince waved them back. "Leave us," he said. The guards hesitated, but a look from the prince sent them retreating. Ambassador Lane tried to stay, but turned those 4 eyes on her, and she suddenly found an excuse to leave as well. Started to follow, but reached out and touched his arm. "Stay," she said quietly, "please." Nodded and moved to the corner of the room, trying to make himself invisible. The prince approached his bed. For a long moment he said nothing. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he lowered himself to one knee. "In my culture," he said, "when someone saves your life, you owe them a debt that can never be repaid. It is called the bond of blood and breath." Felt uncomfortable with this powerful being kneeling before her. "Please stand up," she said. "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything." The prince rose, but his voice remained soft. "You are human. Your people and mine have been enemies for 30 years. You had no reason to save me. No reason to drink poison that should have killed you. Why did you do it?" Thought about the question. She remembered the moment in the banquet hall, the split second when she had seen the shimmer in the wine. She remembered the fear, the desperate need to act, the complete absence of thought. "I don't know," she admitted. "I saw you were in danger and I moved. I didn't think about politics or species or anything else. I just couldn't watch you die." The prince was silent for a moment. Then he made a sound that realized was laughter. "My advisors told me that humans were simple creatures," he said, "emotional and weak. They said your species would never amount to anything in the galaxy. I think they were wrong." Over the next few days, learned more about what had happened to her. Showed her the test results, explaining in simple terms what her body had done. The poison had triggered something in her human DNA, some ancient survival mechanism that had been sleeping for millions of years. Her cells were now able to adapt to threats in ways that should have been impossible. "You're not just immune to tears anymore," told her. "Your body has learned how to learn. The next time you're exposed to something dangerous, you'll adapt even faster." Didn't fully understand what that meant. Not yet. The first test came by accident. A small fire broke out in a nearby section of the station, and smoke filled the corridors before the emergency systems could respond. Breathed in the toxic fumes before anyone could stop her. She coughed once, then twice. Then her lungs stopped burning and she could breathe normally again. Scanners showed her respiratory system had changed in less than a minute, developing new filters that made her immune to smoke inhalation. "This is incredible," he whispered, "and terrifying." The word spread further. The human woman who drank poison, the human woman who could not be killed. Species that had never paid attention to humanity suddenly wanted to meet her. Some were curious, some were afraid, some were already making plans. Sat in her room that night, looking out at the stars through her window. She had wanted to travel among them since she was a little girl. Now she was something more than human, something that even she didn't understand. Prince came to visit her again. He brought a book of poetry and read to her in his strange, musical language. She didn't understand the words, but she found comfort in his presence. He was the only person who treated her normally, who didn't look at her like a specimen or a weapon. "What happens now?" she asked him. The prince closed his book and looked at her with all 4 of his eyes. "Now," he said, You have a choice. Everyone will want to control you, use you, study you, but you are still yourself. You can still decide who you want to be. Thought about his words long after he left. She thought about the farm in Kansas and the girl who had dreamed of stars. She thought about the scared junior who had grabbed a poisoned goblet without thinking. She was still that person, wasn't she? Outside her window, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant and full of possibilities. And somewhere in the darkness, enemies were already making plans for the woman who could not be killed. 6 weeks had passed since the night of the poison, and Morgan was no longer the same person who had stumbled into that banquet hall. Her body had changed in ways that frightened her, amazed her, and sometimes made her feel like a stranger in her own skin. The changes came one at a time, each one triggered by something that should have hurt her, each one leaving her stronger than before. The first major test came during a routine inspection of the station's power systems. A conduit exploded without warning, flooding the corridor with radiation that would have killed any normal human in seconds. Was caught in the blast, and for one terrible moment, she felt her body burning from the inside out. Then the burning stopped. Found her standing in the middle of the contaminated zone, her skin glowing faintly as her cells adapted to the radiation. Within an hour, her body had developed natural shielding that made her immune to even the most dangerous forms of energy exposure. "Your cells are incredible," said, his voice filled with wonder and worry. "They're rewriting themselves faster than any computer could process. It's like watching a million years of evolution happen in minutes." Looked at her hands. They looked the same as always, pale and small and human, but she knew they weren't, not anymore. The second test came from outside. A mercenary, hired by unknown enemies, managed to sneak onto the station disguised as a maintenance worker. He attacked with a neural disruptor blade, a weapon designed to shut down the nervous system of any living creature. The blade pierced her shoulder, felt a wave of agony, then nothing. Her body went limp and she collapsed to the floor. She woke up 3 hours later in the medical bay, completely healed. The neural disruptor had failed because her nervous system had rebuilt itself with new pathways that couldn't be disrupted. The assassin was in custody and had another immunity to add to her growing list. Word spread across the galaxy. The humans called her a miracle. They called her Iran, which meant the one who drinks death. Other species had other names, some respectful, some fearful. Hated all of them. She didn't want to be a symbol or a legend. She just wanted to be herself, the girl from Kansas who liked old movies and bad coffee and quiet evenings watching the stars. But that girl felt further away with each passing day. Prince became her closest friend during this time. The bond meant he visited her often, and their conversations grew longer and deeper. He told her about history, about the wars and peace treaties that had shaped his people. She told him about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, and the way the sun felt on a summer afternoon. "You miss your home," he observed one evening. Nodded. "I never thought I'd say that. I spent my whole life dreaming about leaving Earth, about seeing the universe. Now all I want is to go back and pretend none of this ever happened." "Would you really want that?" The prince tilted his head. "Would you trade what you've become to be ordinary again?" It was a question had asked herself many times. The answer was never simple. Yes, she missed being normal, but she also knew that her transformation meant something. She had survived things that would have killed anyone else. She could go places no one else could go, face dangers no one else could face. The question was what she would do with that power. The conspiracy that had tried to kill Prince had not disappeared. Intelligence reports suggested a network of extremists from multiple species, united by their hatred of the peace treaty. They called themselves the Burning Dawn, and they believed that war was the natural state of the universe. Peace was weakness. Cooperation was death. They had tried once to kill the prince. They would try again. and they had decided that Morgan was their biggest obstacle. The attacks became more frequent. Poison in her food, which her body learned to neutralize. Assassins with new and exotic weapons, each one teaching her immune system something new. A bomb that destroyed half a corridor and left standing in the crater, her skin having hardened into something that could withstand the blast. Each attack made her stronger, but each attack also killed others. Station workers, diplomats, innocent people who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Saved who she could, but she couldn't save everyone. The guilt ate at her. "This is my fault," she told after the third attack claimed 4 lives. "They're coming for me, and other people are dying because of it." Shook his head. "They're coming for peace. You're just the symbol they've chosen to attack. If you weren't here, they'd find another target. But I am here, and I can't be killed, so they keep trying and people keep dying." She made a decision that night. She was done waiting. She was done being a target. The Burning Dawn wanted to hunt her, so she would hunt them first. Prince volunteered immediately. The bond meant her enemies were his enemies, and he was a trained warrior despite his diplomatic role. Refused to stay behind, arguing that needed someone to monitor her biological changes. A small group of human and soldiers joined them, volunteers who believed in the peace treaty and were willing to risk their lives to protect it. They called themselves the Thorn Guard, a name suggested by. She remembered the banquet hall, the way the crystal pillars had looked like thorns reaching toward the ceiling. That was where everything had started. That was where she had stopped being ordinary. The hunt began. They followed leads across 3 star systems, tracking the Burning Dawn through black markets and hidden bases. Walked through environments that would have killed anyone else, radiation zones and toxic atmospheres and the cold vacuum of space itself. Her body adapted to everything, each new challenge making her stronger. But it was the emotional challenges that hurt the most. She saw the damage the extremists had caused, the lives they had destroyed in their quest to restart the war. She saw orphaned children and shattered families and worlds that might never recover. And she started to feel something new growing inside her, not adaptation, not immunity. Anger. The trail led them to a hidden asteroid base on the edge of known space. Intelligence suggested this was where the Burning Dawn's leader operated from, a shadowy figure known only as the Architect. No one had ever seen the Architect's face. No one even knew what species they belonged to. Stood at the window of their ship, looking at the asteroid as they approached. She could feel her body preparing itself, cells shifting and changing in anticipation of whatever dangers lay ahead. "Are you ready?" Prince asked, standing beside her. Thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The poison, the pain, the endless transformations, the friends she had lost and the enemies she had made. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's end this." The asteroid grew larger in the window, dark and silent and full of secrets. Somewhere inside, the Architect waited, and Morgan was coming for them. The asteroid base was a fortress hidden in the darkness between stars. Its surface was covered with weapons that could destroy entire fleets, and its interior was a maze of corridors designed to confuse and trap intruders. The Burning Dawn had spent decades building this place, and they were confident that no enemy could ever breach its walls. They had never faced anyone like Morgan. The attack began at dawn, or what passed for dawn in the endless night of deep space. Led the Thorn Guard through the asteroid's outer defenses, her body absorbing energy blasts that would have vaporized normal soldiers. The warriors moved beside her, their scales flashing as they fired their weapons at the enemy positions. Prince fought with a grace that took breath away. Despite being royalty, he was a warrior trained from birth, and he moved through the battle like a dancer through music. His blades sang through the air, cutting down enemies before they could react. Stayed in the back, monitoring biology from a safe distance. His voice came through her earpiece, calm and steady despite the chaos around them. Your heart rate is elevated, but your cells are stable. Whatever they throw at you, your body should be able to handle it. Should be muttered, that's reassuring. The first trap was a room filled with nerve gas. The burning dawn pumped it in through hidden vents, a poison designed to kill within seconds. Breathed it in and felt her lungs burn for a moment before adapting. She grabbed the two nearest soldiers and carried them through the gas to safety, her body filtering the toxic air before it could reach them. The second trap was a corridor of fire. Plasma jets erupted from the walls, turning the passageway into an inferno. Walked through it, her skin hardening and then healing as fast as the flames could damage it. She emerged on the other side with smoke rising from her clothes but no injuries on her body. The third trap was the worst. They entered a large chamber that seemed empty at first. Then the walls started to glow and felt something she had never felt before. Her body began to dissolve. It was a quantum dissolution field, a weapon so advanced that most species didn't believe it existed. It worked by breaking down matter at the subatomic level, erasing things from existence rather than simply destroying them. Watched her hands start to fade, becoming transparent like glass. The pain was beyond anything she had experienced, beyond anything she could describe. It felt like being unmade, like every particle of her being was being scattered across the universe. Around her, the Thorn Guard screamed and died. She saw two of the warriors dissolve completely, their bodies vanishing like smoke in the wind. She saw a human soldier reach out to her, his face twisted in agony before he disappeared forever. Tried to scream, but she had no mouth left to scream with. This is it, she thought. This is the thing that finally kills me. But somewhere deep inside her, something refused to die. Her consciousness held on, even as her body scattered. She existed as a cloud of particles, spread across the chamber like dust in sunlight. She could feel herself fading, feel the last connections between her atoms starting to break. And then she started to pull herself back together. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Every particle of her being fought to reunite, fought to remember what it had been. She could feel her cells screaming as they reformed, could feel her bones and muscles and organs rebuilding themselves from nothing. The quantum field couldn't hold her because she had become something that existed between states of matter. She was not fully solid, not fully energy, but something new, something that could survive even this. When reformed, standing in the center of the chamber, she was alone. The Thorn Guard was gone, killed by the weapon that had failed to kill her. Only she remained, surrounded by the empty space where her friends had been. For a moment she felt like falling to her knees and weeping, but there was no time for grief. The mission wasn't over. She moved deeper into the base, alone now, driven by anger and loss. Enemies appeared and she destroyed them without thought, her body adapting to each new threat before it could harm her. She was no longer fighting like a human. She was fighting like a force of nature. Prince's voice crackled in her earpiece. He and had survived, having been outside the chamber when the trap was triggered. They were making their way toward her through a different route. The prince said, "We've found the architect's location. Central Command 3 levels down. I'm on my way." She reached the central command chamber to find it heavily guarded. Soldiers from 3 different species stood between her and the door, armed with weapons designed to kill gods. They opened fire as soon as they saw her. Walked through the barrage like walking through rain. Energy blasts splashed against her skin and did nothing. Bullets dissolved before they could reach her. One soldier fired a weapon that created a miniature black hole and felt herself being pulled toward it before her body adapted, generating its own gravitational field to counter the effect. She didn't kill them. Even now, even after everything, she couldn't bring herself to take lives if she didn't have to. She disabled their weapons, knocked them unconscious, and left them lying on the floor as she moved toward the door. The door was sealed with the most advanced lock in the galaxy. Touched it, and her cells analyzed its structure, found its weaknesses, and dissolved it from the inside. Inside, she found the architect. He had not expected that. The Burning Dawn hated the peace treaty, and she had assumed its leader would be from one of the species that had suffered most from the war. But the figure sitting in the command chair, surrounded by screens showing the chaos throughout the base, was unmistakably. He was old, much older than Prince, with scales that had faded to a dull gray. One of his 4 eyes was missing, replaced by a mechanical implant that glowed red in the darkness. He wore the tattered remains of a military uniform and could see the medals of a high-ranking officer. "Admiral," she said, recognizing the name from intelligence briefings. "You started the Burning Dawn." The old smiled, revealing teeth that had been filed to sharp points. "I started nothing. I simply gathered those who understood the truth. Peace is a lie. War is the natural state of all things. Your species, my species, every species in the galaxy, we are all predators at heart. You tried to kill your own prince. Is weak. He inherited his father's throne, but not his father's strength. The treaty he signed would have made the Empire a servant of human interests within a generation." Leaned forward. "I fought in the first battles against your kind. I watched human soldiers die by the thousands, and I saw how easily they broke. You are not meant to rule alongside us. You are meant to serve beneath us." Felt the anger rising inside her again. "You killed my friends. You killed innocent people, all because you couldn't accept that the war was over." "The war is never over," stood and saw that he was holding a device in his hand. "And now it will begin again. This base is equipped with a signal broadcaster that can reach every corner of the galaxy. When I press this button, it will transmit evidence that humans launched an attack on a peace summit. The treaty will be void. The war will resume. Billions will die." His body tensed, ready to move. "I won't let you do that." "You can't stop me." His finger moved toward the button. "Even you are not fast enough." He was right. The distance between them was too great. By the time she reached him, he would have pressed the button and destroyed everything she had fought to protect. But had learned something in the quantum dissolution chamber. She had learned that she was no longer bound by the rules of normal matter. She didn't run toward, she shifted. For one impossible moment, she existed everywhere in the room at once. Her particles spread across space like a wave. Then she reformed, standing directly behind the Admiral, her hand closing around his wrist before his finger could touch the button. "Yes," she said quietly, "I am." The device fell from his grip. The war would not restart today. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Prince and had finally arrived, their faces showing relief and exhaustion in equal measure. The battle was over. The Burning Dawn was defeated. But as looked down at the old Admiral, she knew that some battles never truly ended. There would always be those who chose hate over hope, war over peace. The question was whether she was willing to keep fighting them. For now, the answer was yes. The galaxy celebrated when news of the Burning Dawn's defeat spread across the stars. On 100 worlds, people who had feared the return of war breathed sighs of relief. The peace treaty was safe. The future was secure. Morgan did not celebrate. She sat alone in a small room on the diplomatic station, staring out at the stars. The faces of the fallen haunted her, the soldiers who had died in the quantum dissolution chamber, the innocent people killed in the attacks that had targeted her. She had survived everything. They had not. Found her there hours later. He sat down beside her without speaking, and for a long time they just watched the stars together. "I ran the final tests," he said eventually. "Your cellular structure has stabilized. You're not changing anymore." Nodded but didn't respond. "Do you know what that means?" continued. "You've become the most adaptable organism in known space. There's literally nothing in the universe that can kill you now. Radiation, poison, energy weapons, even quantum dissolution. You survived all of it." "Lucky me," said, and her voice was empty. Sighed, "I know you're hurting, but what you did, what you became, it matters. You saved the prince. You stopped the war. You gave the galaxy a chance at peace. People died because of me. People died because of fanatics who couldn't accept change. That's not on you." Reached out and touched her hand. "You're a miracle. The universe tried to kill you 1,000 times and you refused to die. That means something." Finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were dry, but the pain in them was clear. "What am I supposed to do now? Everyone looks at me like I'm some kind of god. The humans want to study me, find a way to make more like me. They want to worship me. Everyone else is afraid of what I might become. What do you want?" It was the question she had been avoiding. What did she want? Before the poison, the answer would have been simple. She wanted to see the stars, to explore the universe, to have adventures. But that girl was gone now, transformed into something she didn't fully understand. The door opened, and Prince entered. He moved quietly to stand beside's chair, his presence warm and familiar after all the time they had spent together. "The High Council has made a decision," he said. "Admiral will face trial for his crimes. The evidence you gathered has destroyed what remained of the Burning Dawn. Their network is broken." "Good," said. "They also want to honor you. My mother, the Empress, wishes to grant you the title of Iran formally. It would make you a member of the royal household, with all the rights and privileges that entails." Was silent for a moment. "And what does that mean for my life? Would I belong to the Empire?" "No," knelt beside her chair just as he had knelt in the medical bay weeks ago. "You would belong to yourself as you always have. The title is an honor, not a chain. You would be free to go where you wish, do what you wish. But you would have the protection of the Empire wherever you traveled." "The humans are offering something similar," added. "Ambassador Lane has been pushing for you to become an official envoy of the Terran Confederation. Basically, a one-person diplomatic mission with the authority to negotiate on behalf of humanity." "Everyone wants a piece of me," said. "Everyone wants to be close to you," corrected. "There's a difference. You represent something, not a weapon, not a specimen. Hope. The hope that even the weakest among us can become strong. The hope that enemies can become friends. The hope that peace is possible." Looked at him, at this alien prince who had become her closest friend. She thought about the bond between them, the debt he claimed he could never repay. But she realized now that the debt had been paid many times over. He had given her something more valuable than any title or honor. He had given her purpose. "I don't want to belong to anyone," she said slowly. "Not the Empire, not the Confederation, not any government or organization. But I want to help. I want to use what I've become to make things better." Hal asked. Stood and walked to the window. The stars stretched out before her, billions of lights in an endless darkness. Somewhere out there, conflicts were brewing. Species that had never learned to talk were preparing to fight. Problems that seemed impossible were waiting to be solved. "There will be other crises," she said. "Other moments when peace hangs by a thread. I can go to those places. I can walk into situations that would kill anyone else and find a way through. Not as a soldier, not as a weapon. As a mediator. Someone who has no stake in any war, who just wants to help people stop fighting." Rose to his feet, a strange light in his four eyes. A neutral force. Someone who can be trusted by all sides because she belongs to none of them. Exactly. Turned back to face them. "I was a nobody, a junior who got lucky. But now I'm something else. I can't be killed, which means I can't be intimidated. I can't be bought, which means I can't be corrupted. I can walk through fire and poison and every weapon the universe can throw at me." "You want to become a symbol of peace," said, understanding dawning on his face. "Not a symbol for any one species, but for everyone." "Someone has to do it," smiled for the first time in days, "and I'm uniquely qualified." The weeks that followed were busy. Established a new organization, independent of any government, dedicated to preventing conflicts before they became wars. She recruited volunteers from dozens of species, people who believed in peace and were willing to work for it. They gave her a ship, a small but fast vessel equipped with the latest technology. The humans provided funding and supplies. Other species contributed what they could. Within months, Morgan had become the most respected neutral party in the galaxy. She traveled constantly, moving from crisis to crisis. She walked into war zones and talked to generals. She entered plague ships and found cures. She faced down pirates and terrorists and corrupt officials, always with the same message. There is a better way. Let me help you find it. Not everyone listened. Some conflicts were too old, too bitter, too personal to be resolved with words. Lost more than she won in those early days. But she kept trying because trying was all she knew how to do. Prince visited her when he could. The bond had evolved into something deeper, a friendship that transcended species and politics. He once asked her if she regretted that moment at the banquet, the split-second decision that had changed everything. Thought about the question for a long time before answering. I regret the pain, she said. I regret the people I couldn't save. I regret the girl I used to be, the one who just wanted to see the stars without any of this responsibility. But I don't regret saving you. I would make the same choice 1,000 times. Why, he asked. Because that's what humans do. Looked out at the stars she had dreamed about as a child. We see someone in trouble and we help, even when it costs us everything, even when it changes us forever. We help because we can't imagine doing anything else. Was silent for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, a gesture of friendship and respect that meant more to her than any title. The galaxy is lucky to have you, Iran. Smiled. The galaxy is stuck with me, might as well make the best of it. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere out there, another crisis was brewing. Another chance to make a difference. Another opportunity to prove that peace was stronger than war, hope stronger than hate, and that one person, even the most ordinary person, could change everything. Morgan stood up and walked toward her ship. She had work to do,